It's funny because Joe's right. When I was the CEO of Traffic, Joe wouldn't return a single one of my phone calls. But after joining Initiative, the first email I got, I think, was from Joe. So it's amazing how things change. But I'm actually really excited to be here today because I was talking to Babs at Unilever last night. We talked about kind of the juxtaposition that's happening right now, and Joe alluded to it earlier today, is that this is kind of a busy week between Internet Week, between DMS, between those little things called the upfronts. There's a lot going on. So, first and foremost, if someone could actually figure out a programmatic scheduler so that I can actually go to all of these events, that would be awesome, because it is just a melee right now at the moment of trying to get everything accomplished, and trying to get as most out of this week as possible. And the honest reality is the majority of my week this week is being spent at the upfronts for a variety of different reasons. But there's a reason that I'm here this morning and that I wanted to be here is because it's really around the fact that programmatic buying, audience-based buying can no longer be an afterthought. It needs to be part of the overall strategy upfront. There's lots of different ways to use it. There's lots of different ways that right now that we're talking to clients about different strategies, but it absolutely needs to be at the forefront, part of the upfront process when we put together strategies on behalf of our clients. So what I thought today that I would do, and I'm literally, I think, week 5 into my new role at Initiative, so I didn't have a lot of answers before. I have even less answers now. But I thought I would talk a little bit about how I want to approach some of the clients that we're speaking to about this space and give a very kind of high-level understanding. I think I finished my train of consciousness at around 12:30 last night, which is when I sent this deck over. So you guys can help me. You can tell me if this is a good presentation or and there's good substance, or I need a version 2.0. So really, as I said, the opportunity here when I speak to marketers and I speak to CMOs is one of the first questions I ask them is, what is their audience strategy? What audience-based buying are they currently doing? And it's amazing, maybe it's not rocket science, but there's a tremendous disparity in what you hear back. You'll hear things like, well, actually 20% of our display buying is going towards real-time buying. You'll hear things like, I don't know what you're talking about, go ask my digital guy. And you'll hear others saying, it's part of what we want to do in 2012. We're interested in testing or piloting, but we're not quite sure what to do. And then there are others that say, we're ready. At Initiative, we've actually launched a pilot program for TV-based programmatic buying, and we have clients that are ready and they want to get started, but there's a variety of different obstacles that stand in their way that we can certainly get into as we go further into this presentation. So, all of us here, why are we here? We're here because digital media, in theory, delivers on this unbelievable promise, right? This notion of I can move away from tonnage and get to an opportunity where I'm minimizing waste and create this wonderful Cinderella type experience where a digital kiss all of a sudden happens and we deliver on all the things that we want to deliver based upon this amazing RTB world. But the honest answer is, this is reality, all right? And I mean that with full sincerity. And I'm not talking about whether dogs and princes eat kettle chips. I'm talking about the fact that people want to do this, people are embracing it, but in many ways, technology, human beings, culture, all the things that we heard mentioned earlier today are major obstacles. And they get in the way of what should be a very simple concept. And a lot of that is, unfortunately, based upon all of us, is that in order for this to really work, we need to simplify, we need to demystify the process, we need to move out of our buzzword jargon and make it very easy for marketers to understand. I can't tell you, within the last 5 weeks, I've now spoken to at least 4 clients on my end that said, we want to do this, but we're stuck in legal review. Our lawyers don't want to sign up for this for a variety of different reasons. And I don't have all the tools on my end to convince my lawyers what the right answer is to go back to their lawyers. There still needs to be a tremendous amount of education when it comes to some of the paperwork and the legalese and some of the other nuances that exist in the space. But there's lots of different things here that unfortunately are getting in the way of our Cinderella experience. But the bottom line is that it is working. But if we really want this to be mainstream, if we really want this to be part of the media mix and start to grow past the 10 to 15% of probably display spends that are right now being attributed to the RTB space, we need to solve for some of these challenges. So it was simple at one point, right? Agencies had a very simple goal, and yes, I didn't get Joe's permission to use this picture, but I thought this was a better picture than just using the standard Mad Men picture. But the agency goal was pretty simple: deliver customers to our advertisers effectively and efficiently. And the publishers had a very simple goal as well, which was deliver audience to agencies effectively and efficiently. And we all lived in this wonderful world where everyone had a role, they had a responsibility, it was clearly defined, we would all work together, and at 8 o'clock we would all gather around that TV, and we would be informed, and we would be educated, and we would be entertained. And it worked. It was a simple life. But things, of course, changed. Which is, today's consumer is much more intelligent, smarter, and enabled, and more importantly, has the ability to disintermediate everything that we do, period. And we need to ultimately account for that, because the same model, the same constructs just simply don't work. And I know we've all probably heard this message now 1,000 times, so I'm not going to belabor it, but it's extremely important. And what we're trying to talk to marketers about is that it's not just about new media. That's not the answer anymore, because it's all new media. We talk about all things digital. I don't even know what that means anymore, because digital has taken on a definition above and beyond all of us in this room. So we're trying to make it simple and say it's not about new media anymore, but it's about how do we create new marketing solutions as marketers, as brands, as agencies, and how do we bring new marketing ideas to the table so that we can truly embrace programmatic buying and real-time buying, and then create new formats that aren't necessarily part of the current standard formats, so that we don't have to worry about when Dish comes out with a new service where you hit a button and it fast forward through all of our 30s or 60s or 12s or whatever it is that it may be. Because that's really the opportunity here. Because otherwise, as I said, consumers are more enabled and they've figured out ways to completely disintermediate, and we need to change the value proposition so that we stay relevant to them. Again, this is no new concept for the folks in this room, but at Media Brands, this is something that we've built into our mantra, which is we need to bleed audiences. This is where the industry is not just headed, but where it is today. And we need to infuse that not only with our clients, but with every one of our employees. And that's something that we've been working on for now about 2 years, and I think we've made significant progress, but I don't think we have it all figured out either. And one of the reasons is really it's built around this challenge. And I heard Joanna talk about it, and I thought it was great. And I may not be sipping as much of the Kool-Aid as her, because I still think we fundamentally have a problem as it relates to programmatic buying and when and how agencies or marketers are using demand-side platforms, because I do think the majority is still 100% focused, or at least 90% focused, on very short-term DR tactics. And we haven't figured out that balance in terms of how we bring back long-term brand ambition. And the reason being, again, is I don't think it's marketers don't want to or buyers don't want to. It's hard. It's hard to make that justification. It's hard to prove that value proposition. It's not hard to argue with, hey, I got this for less, or hey, I can directly quantify how many sales came out of when I purchased media this way. That's easy. But that long-term brand ambition to truly capture engagement or other opportunities within the programmatic buying, real-time buying space is still difficult, and I don't think a lot of marketers are there yet, truth be told. And they need more insight, they need more learnings. This is not a conversation that can just happen with the digital team. This needs to be elevated. It needs to happen, frankly, with the CMOs, and above and beyond that, it needs to happen with the C-titles within the actual marketing organizations, with those brands. Because otherwise, I don't think we're ever going to move the needle as fast as the folks in this room ultimately want it to move. The other thing, and this is where I get really excited, and one of the reasons that I took on this opportunity to join Initiative and hopefully build on the momentum that we already have, is I want to use these new platforms to hopefully remove these swimming lanes that currently exist, in terms of how we approach digital, or how we approach TV, or how we approach print, or how we approach SEM, because we still, as we fragment further and further, there's more swimming lanes that get created. And I think there's an opportunity for these platforms to really start to deliver cross-channel. And if they can actually integrate with one another across these transaction types, that to me is the real opportunity. That's where we really start seeing efficiency. Are we there yet? I would argue that we aren't. Is there an opportunity? Absolutely. And that opportunity really also exists around how do we bring all these different data formats together. When I was running traffic, one of the things that we sold was the fact that we created this wonderful data tree. And we had 32 different DMP partners all integrated within our platform. And it was wonderful. And we had API integration. But when it came down to it, the brass tacks, if we were going to use two different DMP providers or buy data from one place and combine that with our client's first-party data, nothing integrated. It was extremely complex. And that was just in one very specific silo around display video. When we start expanding beyond just that format and we start bringing all of these different data layers, how do we actually create something that actually integrates beyond just APIs so that it's relevant and it's insightful back to marketers? And that to me is really the opportunity. And we know that, as Joe was talking about something that at another agency we had built maybe 12 years ago, we know the work desktop has revolutionized, and I think there's an opportunity here for the platforms that many of you guys are working on to be the technology enablers for what buyers, planners, optimizers, analysts are actually using moving forward. And I think most agencies ultimately want to embrace that. And certainly that's where the push will come from me as it relates to my organization. Now, how we get there, the good news here is there's multiple paths. There's agencies that are going to take the approach of, it's my house, I'm a do-it-yourself kind of person. Maybe I'll hire a contractor to create new things within my home, but it's my home and I choose to own it. And that's certainly a very smart and a very effective approach, and I think there's lots of agencies, in particular within the world of the holding companies, that are going to try to do as much of that as possible. I think there's also this approach of active adult communities, where I want to live on my own, I want to live a great lifestyle, I want to play golf every weekend, but I also recognize there's an advantage in having some of this stuff consolidated. I don't want to mow my own lawn. There are others that say, might need to move into assisted living, where they are very reliant on third-party partners, bringing them into the mix, white labeling, building on top of. And then there are others that are just going to say, I know what I do. I know what I do really well, and that's what I want to focus on. And because of that, I'm going to move into the retirement community so that I can focus on just that. And this isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying that if you don't embrace this, you're going to die. I'm not suggesting that at all. My point is very simple, is that there's lots of really good answers. There isn't just one answer. But the answer can't be no, I'm doing nothing, and I'm not paying attention to this, because then the inevitable is ultimately going to happen. Thank you very much.
That cover agencies is how you're not really one monolithic organization. And even within that, you're not just digital and traditional. You've got all kinds of units and operations, some back office, some front office, some strategy, some implementing. What are the cultural issues with getting your whole organization to move in this direction beyond just digital traditional?
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Sorry.
There's lots of different, I think issues. There's cultural issues, there's legacy issues, there's just fundamental issues on who owns what resources. There's issues on, how do agencies ultimately invest in these things. And, I think we've tried to take a very practical approach, which is we're a relatively large agency. We represent a variety of large marketers, and I like to think that we're doing a pretty good job. But I know what life was like, in the startup world as well, and I know what, in many cases, being part of, a young, nimble organization, I've seen what, 6 developers can do when they're not, encumbered with bureaucracy. So I think what we've said is, in order for us to stay nimble, we need to centralize some of these things. We can't have every agency within our organization try to develop it in a silo. That's not efficient. And it's certainly not a path to get there fast. So we need to centralize some of our things. And in this case, our lead is Cadron, which falls within our Maps group. That's legacy trading desk trying to ultimately evolve into a broader platform. And within Media Brands, we've made a decision that that's where we're going to ultimately invest. And the other thing, as part of an agency, what I don't want to find is that my own selfishness is that's where all of the innovation goes, and the brand, the media agency, is left without having dedicated resources or without that skill set. So what we're trying to do, and this isn't just as it relates to audience-based buying or programmatic buying opportunities, but embed those skill sets, embed those resources with our team, so that in areas that, frankly, we can't be as nimble as some of the new emerging technologies or startups or other services that will, are happening now and will continue to happen, if we can embed that expertise within our team, then hopefully we're well positioned for success.
Any other questions for Nick? You're a shy crowd. So I love the way Interpublic is set up, and Media Brands in particular right now, because you are integrated in that mindset. A good example is Chris Magel, who's your national broadcast chief. I don't even know if you call it broadcast anymore, but he's been looking at it as all integrated. Even out of home, digital out of home is now part of your national broadcast unit, digital video. And with Cadre on, I know that you're trying to move towards, well, obviously incorporating online video and ultimately television. In Joanne O'Connell's, presentation, she talked about this this notion of, video coming together. How soon do you think before addressability, television addressability, and TV buying systems are integrated into those kinds of platforms?
Sure. It's another great question, and I can tell you that whether it's Chris Magel or Michael Hayes, who runs our digital practice, this is something that we're marching to together, and that it's obviously a big part of my to-do list this year. It is absolutely fundamental. When I look at that question, I always go back to I use my kids for a variety of different ways to be inspired, as well as to look at what needs to be done. And I know this sounds cliche, but it is really simple. When my kids are in front of the TV screen that's in the kitchen, they have very specific expectations, and those expectations live regardless of what screen they're looking at, whether it's in the kitchen, whether it's upstairs, whether it's in the car, whether it's on one of their tablets. And if those expectations aren't met, they scream. So it's very simple. It's a one video world. We need to move in that direction. The organization needs to come together. We need to have an infrastructure that allows for that to happen, and that's happening right now. I mean, we literally a few months ago, launched, and we're in pilot phase with a few of our clients on bringing addressable television and programmatic buying specifically to the TV format, and then how do we align that product back to the current platforms that we're using within the display space. So it's happening. With that said, it's still very much in its nascency. It's something that we do hope to roll out and have mainstream quickly, but it's happening right now.
Okay. Last question I'd like to ask you is about the human element. I mean, what we're talking about here is going to have a huge organizational shift in the composition of agencies. Joanna also discussed this notion of moving to the bifurcated structure of brand experience buyers versus programmatic buyers. The old model was an 80-20 rule. 80% of an agency's buying groups were buying widgets, spot TV, whatever. We're working through that now. Interpublic and Publicis and companies can't afford to have those number of bodies out there. They need to use machines to do that. But it's going to require you to retrain people, redeploy people. There's going to be a lot of churn. How is that going to work through over the next few years?
Yeah, I think it's something that we're working on right now. I mean, there's, you can call the upfront whatever you want, but there's a reason that it existed, is that there was, there's market scarcity, and for that, people were willing to make upfront commitments. What I think as you dig deeper is a lot of the time that our video teams are spending are ensuring that those commitments are made, and it's really through the optimization, and that's where there's a lot of heavy lifting that's still happening. So that's where I look at things like programmatic buying opportunities to where they will inherently create much more efficiency, where I don't think the teams are going to have to spend as much time on optimizing and negotiating back and forth on where what make good inventory is going to be necessary, because that's going to be automated, and that's going to free up a lot of firepower and a lot of intellectual capital that can now be pushed into other things. And from my perspective, those other things are creating new formats and creating new experiences, similar to what Joanna was talking about, so that we can figure out different ways to effectively engage with the consumers that may or may not be working right now. So I think that's we're in the middle. I'm still kind of, just truth be told, still figuring that out and kind of learning and assessing where my organization is. There's a lot of really good stuff that I see. I think we actually have made a lot of progress, and there's a lot of momentum, but I'm not going to sit here and say that we haven't figured out.
Right. Well, it's very exciting. I look forward to checking in with you. Hopefully you will take my calls and you can tell me how that's working out.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Nick.
Thank you for your time.